Hello, and welcome to the Gen X Dad and his Gen Z Teens podcast. This is a program that takes a lighthearted look at generational differences about all sorts of topics. We explore everything from pop culture to history to relationships to politics, but only at a very shallow level. We don't aim to be controversial or be the authoritative voice on any topic. We're not social scientists or scientists of any sort for that matter. We're just here to talk about the things that we think are important and that we will have fun talking about. Also, as an added benefit, it is my opportunity to publicly and on the record prove that I am right and my teens are wrong in all cases, and that the 80s and the 90s were absolutely the best time to grow up. Hey, our topic for today is youth sports. Now, youth sports have definitely changed, I believe, and I believe that the internet has played a definite role, and not necessarily for the better, in what youth sports have become. So first, with the internet and what's available, there are so many more options and better equipment than what I grew up with. Again, I've mentioned before that I'm from a small town in the South. I would say I had the normal childhood of most kids that did youth sports, in the sense that it was a natural progression, sort of normal cycle. As far as American primary sports, which would be starting the year, you're doing baseball in the spring and into the summer. Fall, with the start of school, would be American football, basketball in the wintertime. That was the traditional cycle that I think most kids in the 80s went through and before. There were obviously, in the bigger towns or certain areas, there'd be other niche sports. So like hockey up in the north, wrestling in the Midwest, swimming in bigger cities that had access to pools. There's definitely that opportunity for that, and that could be a part of someone else's experience, but it tended to be more than one sport. Obviously, with bigger towns tended to have more options. Smaller towns, I would say it was mostly just what we all did, and we'd cycle from one to the next. However, there were limitations before the internet, specifically as far as coaching. And so if you wanted to bring a new sport in, somebody had to be familiar with it and not only be able to coach it, but also have information on competitive events to go and do it. Most people don't do some sort of sports just for the sake of doing the sports as a hobby. They want to go out and do various tournaments or competitions. The internet, again, has definitely changed that aspect. You can find all sorts of events online for all kinds of sporting events that you can then travel to if you want, or find them local or host them local and bring people in to do them. The other thing that the internet has been great on is online coaching, or at least available. I mean, there are so many coaches, even if you never actually interact with the coach, you can follow somebody's series on what they do for workouts, explanations of the game, and it's just opened up a whole new avenue for kids to follow what they are interested in. And so that has been a definite good thing. It has opened the door to a lot of other opportunities for kids. Now the question is, how much have we raised the pressure? When it was local, it was local pressure. Now that it's on the internet and you find stuff, it is a balance as far as how much pressure you're putting on, if you just want to be good locally or if you're trying to do something above and beyond. And there's a certain degree of parent and child that might want to be more ambitious, but at what cost? And so what we are seeing, in my opinion, is that we have raised the pressure. Kids are getting into sports way earlier. I didn't get into any sort of competitive sports until I was about 8. I had my kids in probably 2 years prior, 6. I think we might have even done a T-ball at 5, which again is not necessarily competitive, but you're starting to get kids out there. And a lot of it is driven by that fear of falling behind, which, that's the part that's debatable. I know there's a lot of videos about, these kids that are proteges. I mean, I know one that I've seen, Andre Agassi, at 3 years old, is hitting a tennis ball like an adult. But that is not the usual. I don't know if we're doing a benefit to our kids, and I'll talk to my teens in a minute about starting earlier, but they'll have their opinion on how they went through it. But I didn't start until 8. Youth baseball was the first program, and then later on there was some youth football and basketball, but baseball was the first thing. Here we live in a bigger city. I mean, there are kids starting at 3, 4 years old. And again, it's not very competitive at that age, obviously, but the fact that parents and kids are starting to track in a direction can make it difficult. Now, I grew up playing some of those. I also dabbled a little bit in tennis and golf. I had my kids take some tennis and golf lessons. You guys have also played some soccer. We'll talk a little bit about that. But for me growing up, baseball in my town was probably the most serious sport until you got up into high school. And I was well coached, and I had the benefit of being on a baseball all-star team. But later, when things changed for me, and looking back, to some degree, I always felt bad for some of the kids that didn't necessarily make all-star type teams, because then their summer was done once the season was done. And in most cases, you still had a whole entire summer left. And so I think that was a detriment to those kids. Here in a bigger city, and now at club type teams, you can cycle from season into your club team or something like that. But it tends to also bring on pressure of being a year-round athlete in the same sport, because the fear is if you miss a season or take a break, you fall behind. I think that's a fallacy, in my opinion, but it is definitely out there, and there is pressure that you, as a parent, you feel like if you just take even sort of a little break, that your kid's going to fall behind. I will say, though, that perspective, or better perspective, is trying to remember that who a youth athlete is at 10, 11, or especially 12, which is a lot of cutoffs from when you move from small fields to big fields, is not necessarily who that athlete is going to be at 15 and 16. But it's hard to sometimes separate from the moment and wanting your kid to have some success and enjoy it, in which, I think most kids are going to have more enjoyment if they are feeling successful and confident. And it's hard to lose perspective that, developmental sports, which is what youth sports is, shouldn't be as much pressure, and and that things could completely change by the time they're 15 or 16. I mean, based on growth spurts, availability of coaching in high school, available injuries, movements, all types of things that come into play that are just part of life. All right. So again, I did have a very good experience. I'm happy with my experience that I had, but it is different from what my kids. I've tried to recreate it, to some degree as best I can, with trying to find that balance between pushing them and then letting them relax and enjoy it. And so we'll hear from them and see how well I succeeded and what their thoughts are. So first off, I'll start with my older teen. Let's just go with your impression. I mean, you're older, you're through really youth sports, but what was your memories of, what was your overall impression of your youth sports as you came up?
I think overall it was pretty good. I think definitely nowadays it has gotten a lot more competitive kind of in the youth area. I think there's a lot more pressure on people to, be, I guess, like prospective athletes at much younger ages than before, and especially kind of coming into high school. Between parents like holding kids back or transferring schools or even moving houses so kids can go to certain schools so they can play sports at certain high schools in order to try to get them set up for potential college sports careers and stuff. I think that's become a lot bigger of a thing nowadays than it used to be. I know a lot more people do that now just because it's gotten so much more competitive kind of to move on to the next levels. So, yeah.
Okay, what about you?
Where I'm at right now, I don't really see a lot of that, but I'm sure I'll see more of it when I go to high school.
Okay, but we're talking a little bit about pre-high school. And so, again, would you say you have good memories of the things that you have done?
Yes, I would say that. Actually, club baseball, has become a whole different animal.
All right, we're going to talk about club teams a little bit more in a minute because there's volunteer and then there's for-profit teams. That adds a whole nother dimension and pressure onto youth sports. And again, there'll be all sorts of things with that. But obviously with a for-profit team, that team has to win. Otherwise, the coach / owner of the team is not going to have people play for him. So again, and debatable as far as, what are people trying to get out of for-profit teams when they're putting all that money into it. But do you feel that at any point there was too much pressure put upon you as a youth athlete?
No, I don't think so. I think the right amount of pressure was put on. Yeah.
Okay, what about you? Did you ever feel like there was too much pressure put on you?
No, not really.
Okay. What about good memories versus bad memories? I mean, not everything was rainbows and unicorns. I mean, do you have specific bad memories of things that you wish would have gone differently?
I mean, a few. I mean, none that really specifically that I would go back. I think all of it was kind of just part of just sports in general. Stuff happens. It's not always perfect. So I don't think there's anything where I would say was a huge negative impact or something.
Okay. What about, we see on YouTube and things like that, and the internet has blown up as far as overzealous coaching or overzealous parents. Have you seen some of that? Do you remember? I mean, were there teams, fans, parents that you remember that got out of control over ultimately what was just a youth baseball game?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it happens all the time. Yeah. I think just a lot of people take or get way too into, at the end of the day, what really is not a big deal. So, yeah.
Okay, what about you?
Yeah, I've seen a couple cases. It's always pretty stupid.
All right, what about hyper-competitiveness amongst kids? I mean, did you always get along with kids, or was there a feeling that, I will say I had a good relationship with the kids that I grew up with. I mean, we were competitive with each other, but we were also friendly. Did you ever experience just where all of a sudden the competitiveness of it started building a wall, and not necessarily that you're wishing something bad on somebody, but kinda?
I think for the most part, it's pretty good natured, especially once you kind of get into the later levels where, you're in high school and beyond, where kind of everyone is sort of in the same spot, and it's we're all out here for the same thing. So, I mean, you get occasional people here and there that are not great, but I mean, that's kind of just the same with anything. I think for the most part, it's not too bad.
Okay, what about you?
I've had a couple cases where kids have just been overly competitive. It's not even to the point where they're actually good, but they're just kind of annoying, and how do I say it? It's just kind of it's like a little fly buzzing around, and you always end up beating them because you just don't like them.
Okay. Now, what about the competitions? Traditionally, and that's why it's on ESPN, like the Little League World Series for baseball. But nowadays, within club worlds or other stuff, there's probably dozens of what are labeled as World Series, like for baseball, or championships for basketball, and then a lot of it has to do around clubs. Do you think there's too much in that way of competition, or is that healthy in that there's just so much more availability for teams to have success at different places?
I think for the most part it's positive. Having more availability is kind of always better, and being able to get more people into sports because they are very beneficial in a lot of ways. But at the same time, there's obviously a lot of money to be made in it, so you can get in cases where there's people or companies or clubs trying to just kind of do money grab situations where they're kind of damaging, I guess, like kind of the point of the sport and the integrity of the sport. And I think at the end of the day, you got to kind of find a balance of availability and also just not having everything be every team be a national champion because they all compete in different leagues or whatever.
Yeah, that's the one thing. But I do think there are more opportunities, and I do think that's overall a better place. Because like I said, I go back to we had one all-star team, and like I said, for all the kids that didn't make that all-star team, they had nothing else to do during the summer. And I always thought, when I finally got some awareness that was kind of lame. Maybe they should have just kept the season going for these kids to do this stuff. Hey, I mentioned earlier, and I'll use myself as an example. I was a pretty good baseball player when I was 12. A couple years later, I just moved on from baseball. And so in the spirit of, a kid is not who they are at 12 or 10 or 11 is not necessarily who they are at 15, 16, and 17. Have you guys seen some of that?
Yeah, well, definitely. I kind of went through the same thing. I played baseball for pretty much my entire childhood, and then I got to high school, and now I don't even play baseball anymore. In completely different other sports. So I think, just stuff changes, especially kind of once you get to high school. That's, I think, a big, and then after high school are kind of, I think, like the two big points of where, you kind of have to figure things out, and things usually end up changing, whether you're, just going to still do sports or, maybe you change what sport you're doing or anything,
Okay. Do you feel, looking back now, is there anything that you would have liked to have done, or a sport that you maybe wish you would have been introduced to that looks like something that you would have done?
I think maybe starting football earlier, because I didn't start playing football until my junior year in high school. Maybe if I'd started my freshman year, but at the same time, I had a bunch of other stuff going on, so it kind of wasn't like it wasn't a thing. So things happen as they happen. So it is what it is. But I do wish, I think it would have been nice to have started earlier.
Okay. And again, just for the record, I did offer you to do some of that, but you were pretty wrapped up in some other things. The other thing is, you're leaving it up, for the adults out there. Sometimes kids don't know what they don't know. But I'm glad you didn't say something like water polo, or you really wish you had started that, because that ship is definitely sailed. All right. What about you? Is there any sport that you wish you would have had a little more opportunity to do?
I wish I'd switched to football earlier. Just seeing where I am like right now, and especially where I want to be, I think that switch would have definitely helped for a lot of reasons.
Okay. But you're not, you actually still are coming in at a pretty good time for that. So I don't think you're missing too much. So with that, what advice do you have for parents or youth athletes out there?
I think kind of try stuff out while you're young. Try to kind of figure out what it is you enjoy, and don't get too wrapped up in anything really. And until you get to high school, none of it matters. I think the time kind of before high school is when you should just be trying stuff out and just trying to build like yourself as an all-around athlete instead of trying to like specialize in something from such a young age, because that's how you just get burnt out, or you never really end up achieving what you want. And then I think kind of once you get into high school, that's when you got to start kind of making decisions and deciding what's going to be your sport or sports. Yeah, I think just as, like I said, before high school, it's beneficial to just kind of try stuff out, be a multi-sport athlete. Because if you can just kind of build a wide variety of skills, it's a lot better than being, super good at one thing, but then maybe for some reason or another that doesn't end up working out, and now you're kind of screwed. So yeah.
Okay, what about you? Any advice to parents or youth athletes?
For the athletes, kind of what he said. Before you get to high school, always like try things out, because you never know what you'll end up liking, and how that may affect what you're doing right now. And for parents, don't dump so much money into places for sports before high school, because it doesn't really matter. And also just don't put a lot of pressure on your kids to do all this crazy stuff before they're in high school, when it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're not the first ones to come up with some of that advice. I'm glad to hear that you guys had, at least, looking back, you have more certainly good memories than bad memories. I think sports is a great avenue to learn life lessons, as far as teamwork. I mean, all the stuff you talk about, hard work, and that things can pay off in success, and then working through adversity. But I am glad that I did push to the level that I could for you guys to do different things and give you a taste of different things. Because again, you're not defined by whatever athletic thing that you can do or can't do. You're defined by the amount of effort and character that you show, and the enjoyment that you have, and have more good memories than poor memories. So with that, I think that's all that we have for today. I want to thank everybody for listening. Youth sports, yeah, it is crazy and different. And, I think this one's a draw as far as who had it better. There was, I think, a better system with enjoyment, with no pressure to formally just pick one thing and become great at it. But the opportunities and coaching and everything that the internet provides is a real benefit there too. And I wish I had had some of the things available to my kids. So with that, that's it. That's all we have for today. This has been the Gen X Dad and his Gen Z teens. I appreciate you guys listening, and we'll catch you next week. Bye.